Hey everyone, Rob B here with Rob D, and it's our predictions episode. I'm just going to say it, Rob D has gone wild. I've waited 10 years for this, but he's gone big with his predictions this year.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. Thank you for joining us. We spend all day, every day in property. We advise a multi-million pound fund. We did more than £100 million of property deals last year. So you'd like to think we know what we're talking about, and you'd like to think we'd know better than to put our neck on the line and give some fairly precise predictions for all manner of things that are going to happen in 2024. But apparently we don't know any better, because we're about to do that right now.
Rob, it's only our second podcast of the year, but I am very happy to be bringing a positive news story. I want to bring the positive vibes in 2024. It's the news, right? So we can't always bring positivity, but this week at least, we certainly can.
Yeah, mortgage rates are coming down and they're anticipated to fall further. So as reported on Sky, HSBC has slashed its rate. You can now get a 5-year deal at 3.94%. Unbelievable. That actually sounds good now. Wouldn't have done a couple of years ago. But in the context of what we've seen over the last couple of years, a 5-year deal starting with a 3 is fantastic. Halifax and Leeds Building Society have also both cut their rates already this year. And everyone who watches the market seems to believe that other lenders are going to follow suit. So I know there are some listeners, because I've heard from them, who've been brave, who've been playing chicken with the rates, who've been convinced that they're going to come down, have been refusing to move on to a fix, and have been riding it out on a variable for the last little while. Well, their time may be coming soon.
Well, Rob, I am one of those people. I've got 2 buy-to-lets at the moment that are rolling because I've held out. So I'm very, very pleased by this news story. And of course, if you like news stories, you probably pick up the Sunday Times each week. So if you do, then make sure you check out our article in the home section each week in the Sunday Times, where you can get even more property goodness. Check out our latest questions we're answering and a picture of our smiling faces.
Right, it's time to make our property predictions for 2024. Is this the year the crash finally takes place? Or what do we believe are going to be the top performing areas? Or would you be crazy to invest anywhere this year? And as we always do, we're going to go way outside our area of supposed expertise and make some broader predictions as well. But Rob, before we're forced to throw out a number, because we always do, we never shy away, it's worth setting the scene a little bit and see what the consensus is. What's everyone else saying out there?
Well, in a word, it's negative. And here are those numbers for you. We've collected them, at least the majority of them anyway. So Savills, -3, Frank Knight, -4, Hamptons, 0, Rightmove, -2, Zoopla, somewhere between -2 and -4, and Nationwide, flat. So not a great read. Not a crash though, Rob. So at least the experts are not predicting a crash. That is somewhere between a flat year or a, slightly disappointing year. It's not suddenly you've lost your shirt. It's not everyone panicking, but it's not a great read either. I mean, I'm not particularly excited by those numbers, but predictions aren't there to make you excited. They're there just to give you someone's viewpoint. And that's what these experts have done. You've talked about on YouTube how some of these experts have performed previously. So go and check that video out. It went out recently over on our YouTube channel, but they all are similar. So across the board, the number is somewhere between -4 or flat 0. They're in that little collection. There's actually not that much variance. It's going to be interesting, Rob. Are we going to break the mold? And I don't know what you've got in mind. That's why I'm really excited about this episode, because I don't know any of your predictions yet. Not one. And it's the same for you. So this is going to be a really interesting episode.
Yeah, we've got a few bullet points in front of us with the categories, but no predictions. We'll have to see. And the pressure is on because unlike most of these other organisations, we have to turn the microphones back on in December and see how we did. So it sounds like we're playing it up a bit, but I do feel the pressure when we do these. And especially because last year we did surprisingly well. It was one of our best years in recent memory. So it definitely feels like this could be that difficult second album. We'll have to see how we get on. And luckily, Rob, as I'm talking, this means I can throw it over to you to go first with your predictions. Yes!
I was going to do the same. Okay. Right. I will go. You're going to get a feeling across the board with all my predictions. And it's not because I've had a strong coffee this morning, and it's not just because I've got New Year positivity, but I truly believe this. And I believe that 2024 will be a decent year for most assets, not just property, but most assets. And I believe that general sentiment is changing. I believe fear is disappearing. I believe the green shoots of optimism are returning. And I think this will be reflected in all asset prices across the board. Now, as you say, we hold ourselves to account. So this could massively backfire what I'm saying. I will give a caveat. If there's some crazy additional war, some new coronavirus or whatever, and I'm not predicting any of those because we don't want any of those. If anything crazy happens, then everything I say goes out the window. So as economists would say, my predictions are based on all things remaining equal. So with that said, house prices. I believe house prices will be in positive territory this year. I do, which goes against every other expert that we've talked about this morning. Now, I'm not predicting anything crazy, but maybe just going into positive territory would put me in that crazy category. But I'm going to say that property prices in the UK average, will be somewhere between 0.1, so 0.1 and 2.5. So in that range, I believe property prices will increase slightly in 2024. They may even go further. Maybe I'm being too conservative because I am feeling pretty good about this. I don't think all areas are equal, and we'll talk about some areas shortly. But I do think the UK as a whole will end up in positive territory this year. Rob, am I crazy? What are you thinking?
I'm going to go crazier. And I agree with everything that you've just said, but I've been thinking about this and I'm willing to take the same background feeling and state it in a more aggressive way. And I wasn't sure about this because the temptation is always to think that change is going to be marginal. The future is going to look pretty much like the past. There's a positive case, there's a negative case, split the difference. So you come out at like +1, -1. And I was really tempted to do that because it's the comfortable thing to do. And there are forces pulling in both directions. So there's a really clear positive case, which was that the property market had a lot thrown at it last year and it didn't capitulate. So it's stronger than most people thought. Now mortgage rates appear to be coming down. So there is a clear argument for the market performing well. But there is a bear case as well, which is that this soft landing, where it seems like inflation's been brought under control without a recession, seems a bit too good to be true. Are we actually going to get a recession after all? Money growth is currently negative after all, and that predicted the boom, so it might predict the crash as well. And you could take the view that the market was just treading water last year. Sellers weren't willing to give ground, but this year they'll be forced to sell at lower prices. Given those two opposing, both perfectly plausible arguments, like I say, tempting to just go straight down the middle and say, oh, well, balance each other out, it'll be zero. But I'm going to go the opposite way. I'm going to say this is not going to be a small gear. My core prediction is that I think house prices will be up, and I think they're going to be up by 4% or more. But I think there's a world in which something goes very wrong and house prices go down by 4% or more. That's the edge case. That's not what I think is going to happen, but I think it could. So what I'm actually saying is that prices won't be in the range of -4 to +4. So I've given myself a huge band to be wrong. I've got 8% where I could be wrong here. So I probably will end up being wrong, but at least it makes things interesting.
You know what? I think we can stop doing these predictions episodes now because I've waited for 10 years for you to go bolder than me on house prices. And I've always felt like I've been the crazy one of the two of us. And you've done it, Rob. I'm loving 2024 already. This is brilliant. New Rob D. Yes, let's have a bit more of this. Okay. So I do want it on record that I did say it could be beyond 2.5% as well. So, because you're making me nervous now with the strength of your prediction. But yeah, I'm with you. I can see what you're saying happen. I think I've played it safe. I think playing it safe probably wins more often than not. So I think my prediction has more chance of happening than yours. But I can absolutely see how you've got to the point you have been. And maybe I've just not been bold enough. Maybe my coffee is not as strong as yours. But I absolutely love that, Rob. Because you made me go first on house prices, I, of course, am going to make you go first on top performing areas. I would say, of all the years we've done this podcast, this section, this area, is where we've performed incredibly well. I will give us some credit here. This is an area that we've done so well in. So let's ruin it. What have you got for 2024? Let's mess it up.
I'm playing it much safer here. I hope I'm playing it safe anyway. So, but the three that I've picked as my top three are Nottingham, Birmingham and Leeds. And this does feel really safe because Nottingham and Birmingham were top 1 and 2 last year and Leeds was 4th. I just don't see anything really changing in terms of those dynamics. So it feels right that they will continue to be up there. The only slightly more interesting thing I will say is keep an eye on Newcastle. Newcastle have been languishing for years.
Are we talking about the football team or?
I don't know anything about football, Rob. No, I'm talking about the city in terms of house prices. They've been down the bottom of the table in terms of house prices for years, but last year it ended up coming 7th, which is a bit of a surprise. So you could say later in the cycle, Newcastle's time is starting to come. Maybe that will pick up and post a top 5 finish. Who knows? But what do you think?
Okay, not quite the same, but similar. So I've picked 2 to finish in the top 3. And I've gone for Birmingham also. I think that's an easy one to pick. I agree. I don't think it's that brave. I've also put Manchester in there. And Manchester has been one of the top performing cities for close to a decade now. But I think Manchester will continue to do well. And the reason that makes my list is the international appeal. Manchester does attract international investors, a bit like London and Edinburgh, not to the same scale. But for me, it's one of the few cities in the north of England that does attract a lot of overseas investors. So for that reason, just supported by that alone, I can see it being one of the best performing cities. I don't have your list, Rob, but I'm sure you'd have Manchester in your top 5, so I don't think it's that wild. But yeah, Manchester and Birmingham for me.
Yeah, I think that's right. If I had to round out my top 5, I'd probably go like Manchester, Sheffield, something like that. So I think that's entirely fair enough. I think it's a good point in the show to make one of the points that we often do when talking about house prices and regions, which is that regions are really important because when you're talking about average national house prices, it's fun, but it's kind of irrelevant because you're not going to buy the average UK house. You're going to be buying in an area, and some areas always perform vastly better than others. But also, when we're talking about places like Birmingham, for example, that's not just Birmingham city centre. Whenever a city centre is strong, that ripples out, and the benefits end up being felt by everywhere within commuting distance. So if you're being guided in terms of where you invest based on what we think, which is not necessarily a good idea, this doesn't mean you need to go and plonk yourself down right in the very middle of the city. But the strong performance of these cities, if it ends up happening, will produce benefits for the whole wider area.
Okay, so let's do London next. And we have been rotating this, so I'll go first on London. While the UK I see being in positive territory, again, I see London being one of the worst performing areas in the UK as a city. But also, I see it being in negative territory. I think London will see falls with their property prices this year. I think a lot of experts have said that as well. I don't think it's that crazy. The experts think the UK is going to fall, so therefore London's part of that. So London as a fall for me. I think of the property market mix, it's that really top end, and London, let's face it, with the prices that London is at, makes up a lot of the top end. That's the area that will struggle. Unless something happens with stamp duty, which isn't on the cards right now, I can see that top end of the market really struggling. Because to move house in London, a £2 million house is a normal house in some areas. It's not that grand. I know that can sound crazy for those who don't live near or in London, but that's the truth. The stamp duty on a property of that level is the price of a property you could buy in some region to the north, 151,000. If you're buying it as a buy-to-let, and some people do buy-to-lets in London, and you've got that additional rate of stamp duty, it's £211,000, which is an effective tax rate of 10%. So 10% of the property price is taxes, an additional 10%. That's nuts. How can that market perform when stamp duty is that level? Yes, it has performed before, and yes, it will perform again. But I think, obviously, it's not just down to stamp duty, but for those people who live in London, who don't have, excess millions, they might just have a property that's worth a couple of million quid, and that's where a lot of their wealth is tied up. The thought of moving just is not appealing right now. So I can see people sitting tight. I can see the market struggling. I don't see a lot of activity in the London market. Unless the pound weakens dramatically, I don't see the draw for overseas investors either. Of course, they will exist and it will happen, but I just don't see London having a good year in 2024, which has been pretty much the last, 6-7 years for London now. It's been a long time since London's had a good year, and I don't think 2024 is going to be a year of change for London.
No, I've got nothing particularly interesting to add to that. That sounds right. If I was making a prediction, I'd say London to be worst performing region because it was last year. I think it will be again this year. I think if you're a certain type of investor, it could be a great year for bargain hunting in London. Because we talked at the beginning of the show about how mortgage rates are coming down, but they've still obviously gone up significantly over the last couple of years. And in London, expensive properties, big mortgages, you're going to have some people who overextended themselves on expensive properties, and they're going to need to get rid. And obviously, if you're going in and buying that property, your yield is not going to be spectacular. You're going to pay a huge amount of stamp duty. But for a very long-term hold, there could be deals to be done. That's not going to be me this year, but I think for some people, London's challenges will create opportunities to do really good deals. But from a predictions point of view, yeah, it'll be down there. A new entry to our predictions this year, because we've never made any predictions about rents previously, but we really should, because we talk about rents a lot on the show. We talk about them in every monthly market update, and we should, because rents are pretty important from a property investor's point of view. So we need to choose a benchmark, like we always use nationwide data when assessing ourselves for house prices. The ONS puts out an index of rental prices on a monthly basis, and that includes both newly let properties, so properties where the tenant has left, it's being relet, but also tenancies that have continued and there may have been some kind of rent review. And it's important to mention that because different indices, depending on what they measure, throw out massively different numbers when it comes to rents. So for 2023, the most recent data, which goes up to November, shows rents increasing by 6.2%. I don't think rent rises are going to be as extreme as they have been recently. I think there's obviously still more demand than supply, but I think the real demand shocks have probably passed, especially if the housing market starts moving again. First-time buyers start moving out of rental accommodation again. That'll reduce demand somewhat, but I think rents will still be strong. So I'm going to go with up somewhere from 4 to 5% would be my prediction.
Okay. Interestingly, my number's a little different. I'm going to go up as well, but my range is 2 to 4%. So I do think rents will increase, but I don't think it's going to be quite as much as you've predicted. But I think we're clearly in agreement that rents will rise this year. And it doesn't happen every year for people going, of course, they'll rise. It doesn't happen every year, but rents will rise this year. And my number is somewhere between 2 to 4%. We'll see. Okay. A number now that I don't actually think historically we've done too well with, Rob, is interest rates. Interest rates, our predictions over the years, at least mine anyway, haven't been wonderful. So I'm going to be really boring. I'm just going to get this out quick. I think interest rates will finish lower than they are right now. And that's due for a few reasons. If inflation is trending downwards, the political pressure to move interest rates downwards. I'm pretty sure the predictions, the consensus is in the markets that they're going to move downwards again this year. Not that wild, but I'm not going against the grain. You don't need to be a contrarian against everything. So my view is they will be further down than where they started in the year. They started at 5.25%. I think they'll finish somewhere lower, probably to give some number beginning with a 4.
Well, that's a boringly large range. I'll narrow it down a little bit, but I agree. I certainly see lower. If I had to guess, and it is a guess, I'd say 4.75, maybe 4.5. So 2 or 3 cuts. The Bank of England's been slow to do everything. I don't think they're going to be in a rush to pull rates way down. So that'd be my guess. But as I said, there is this outside chance of the wheels really coming off this year. I don't think that's the most likely outcome, but there is a world in which they're forced to really slash rates because the economy needs some help.
Okay, so you can say the interest rates are related to property, and that was on the edge of our circle of knowledge. I don't know how big that circle is, but let's just say that was on the edge. Let's move out of that circle now. Let's move into areas that, let's face it, we probably don't know that a lot about, but luckily for everyone listening, we have opinions. So, the FTSE, Rob. What will the FTSE do this year? Is it up, down, flat? Is it massively up? I mean, you've been pretty bold so far. Are we going double digit up? Are we going double digit down? Where are we landing?
I don't have anything qualified to say about this. I don't have a strong feeling. I'm tempted to say down because the answer is normally down when it comes to the FTSE. It always disappoints, and I've always been right in the past when I've said down. But I'm not, because I share what you said at the very beginning about it being a broadly positive year for all types of assets. So I'd say up, but only slightly so. Basically flattish.
Okay, so I'll put a number on it. I think the markets will close above 8,000, which is up from where we are now by at least 5%. And how far above that, I don't know. I don't know enough, but it just falls into my belief that all asset classes will do well in 2024. Not spectacular, not crazy, but just do well. Well, actually, let's get on to crazy, Rob, because next on the list is Bitcoin and crypto in general. It has been great talking about Bitcoin over the last few years because consistently it's been the wildest performer for what we look at. So we talk about house prices, we talk about FTSE, we started talking about rents. That's all interesting stuff. But crypto and Bitcoin in particular, yeah, that's where the crazy stuff happens. So saying it's going to be flat isn't going to work here because you will be wrong. Like, flat doesn't work. So what is it, Rob? Are you being bowled up or bowled down, or are you going flat?
No, I'm only talking Bitcoin. I don't really know much about the rest of I don't know much about Bitcoin, do I? I still can have an opinion about it. I know relatively more about it. I can see it being a big up year for Bitcoin, and I'm not going to put a number on it, so I hope that you will. I haven't got that far. 3 reasons for it to potentially get to go up. One is it had everything thrown at it last year and didn't capitulate and still finished strongly. Second, you've got all these rumours of an ETF, which basically means institutional money will be coming into the space. That seems likely to get approved at some point. And you've got the halving, which is too boring and technical to go into for most listeners. But basically, historically, after one of these halving events, Bitcoin tends to do well for the following year and goes into a bit of a boom phase before then having one of its crashes again. So for me, all of that is in place for a strong up year for Bitcoin.
I'm with you, Rob.
I hope you're going to give us a number wrong.
I'll give you a number. Bitcoin is back. Bitcoin is back, baby. Yep, it's back. Bitcoin, and the reason why it's back is because I've been doing in-depth analysis. No, I haven't. Of course I haven't. The reason Bitcoin is back is because people are talking about it again. Sentiment drives Bitcoin massively, more than any other asset class I can think of. And people over Christmas started to talk to me about Bitcoin, unprompted. And when that happens, then what tends to happen is it'll eventually ripple out to the masses. Probably the people I mix with are not your normal type of people, because normal people wouldn't really want to mix with me. But Bitcoin came into conversation, and in quite a big way. Multiple times I had conversations about Bitcoin over the Christmas period at different social events and crypto in general. So I think Bitcoin is back. I think crypto is back. I can see a positive year, at least the first half of the year being very positive. I think at some point during 2024, Bitcoin will see gains of at least 30%. Now, that may sound wild, but it is Bitcoin. So I really do believe that if this sentiment train continues, that Bitcoin could see big gains this year. Might be wrong, but right now, as this has been recorded, I can really see this happening. I can really see it playing out. Please, please, please do not invest on my confidence and the fact I had a few chats with people who have probably had a few too many drinks over Christmas as your investment strategy. But it's crazy how often that works with asset classes, and particularly Bitcoin and the volatility it brings, that when the consensus believe in it, the prices go up.
Yeah, public service announcement to any long-term holders out there. Start putting those sell orders in. A couple of idiots on a property podcast are starting to talk about it. Might be time to take some profits. All right. So we've gone way out of our area of expertise. Let's go even further. We've got not one, but 2 elections this year. We're going to have a US presidential election and almost certainly going to have a UK general election. Rob, do you fancy taking a punt on the outcome of either of those?
I'll go for what is perceived to be the easy one, and I'll say what probably most people think. Maybe not everyone wants it, but you don't always get what you want. And I'm politically agnostic. I've voted all parties in the past. I'm not a particular colour. I always vote of what's best. And what I'm about to say is not an endorsement because I haven't decided yet on who I shall vote for. But I think it's a shoo-in for Labour. I think generally people are quite fed up with the Tories. I just think there's the fatigue now. It's like same old. It's like people are bored with the infighting. People are bored with the lack of progress. But what have we achieved? I'll let you, the listener, answer that. And I feel that a lot of people feel that way. And because of that, unless something very, very dramatic happens, and I think that probably the bookmakers will agree, if you look at the odds, which I haven't, but I think Labour must be odds on to win the election this year. We will have an election, that's been confirmed, and Labour should win. By how much, I think, is the interesting question. Will it be a landslide? Will it be a hung parliament? Who knows? Will they have a small majority? All those things are up for grabs. I don't know. What I do believe is that it would take something massive for that to change. And I can't see anything but a Labour win right now.
I'm not going to make a prediction because I find it hard to put into words how little I care about this. I know some people get very exercised about politics in general, and property investors get very fearful about a Labour government and some of the things that they've been saying. I just don't think it matters that much. This time around in particular, the difference between the parties doesn't seem that great to me. Just having no view is enough to anger lots of people, and that's fine. But I think both in like the broader kind of geopolitical sense of things, but also in terms of like your own life and what you can do and what you can control, It doesn't matter that much in either of those realms. So I just don't really care. But it is hard to see how it'll be anything other than a Labour win. But who knows? The world has a funny way of making strange things happen and making people who make predictions look really silly. I'm sure we've given the world plenty of fodder in this episode.
We have. But I completely agree, Rob, on the election point. It doesn't matter, and that'll rattle people, I know. But none of these numbers that we've run through today matter. If you want to be a success in 2024, it is down to you. If you think a government is going to decide whether you're successful or not, then you are going to be very, very disappointed in life. You are in charge. You are the master of your destiny. You can decide if 2024 is a great year or not. Now, things will be thrown at you. It always happens. That's life. And it's not always fair and it's not always great. But most of the time, life's wonderful. And in those nice segments of that wonderfulness, you can be successful. You just have to decide. And once you've decided, you need to take action. Whether property prices are up 4%, down 4%, London does well, London does terribly, does not decide on how successful you will be this year. This is all interesting, right? And I've really loved going through these numbers. But remember, after going through all of it, none of it matters. If you're listening to this going, property prices might be down 4%, so I'm not going to have a good year, then you know what? You're right. You won't have a good year because you've got that mindset. But if you've got the mindset, no matter what happens this year in 2024, I'm going to win, I'm going to back you.
So those are our predictions for 2024. There are some bold ones in there. How stupid will we feel in December? We'll just have to wait and see. But of course, we'll keep you updated on what's going on in property throughout the year, including in our monthly market update podcast, the first of those coming up next week. But something else that we always do on the show is bring you a little bit more before we wrap up in the form of Hub Extra, whether it's a resource, a quote to think about, a recommendation, just something that's going to make your life a little bit better. Rob, what have you got for us this week?
Well, I haven't got it. It's another Rob who's delivered this, and it's Rob Wiggins. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he's been on the podcast a few times. He's part of our sourcing team at Property Hub Invest. He is hugely responsible for putting those multi-million-pound deals together, along with the rest of the people in that team, and a wonderful team they are. But because his main skill set is getting good deals, it doesn't limit himself to property, no. Rob Wiggins is a deal hunter, and this is an absolute classic. And I want to read out what he said, because Rob, you said this is just a brilliant copy, and I completely agree. He messaged us both on Teams, and this is exactly how he laid it up. Want to know a money-saving hack even Martin Lewis doesn't tell you about that I discovered and used for the last couple of years? I mean, he had me then, Rob. That was it. I read on. And he then went on to describe this hack he does. And the hack is that he buys gift cards that are on resale. And if you're making a biggest purchase, then you can buy gift cards that are discounted for people who don't want them anymore because they prefer to have the cash, between 5 and even 20% off. He bought his boys bikes for Christmas, and because he got some vouchers and deals, he got money off there. But then he went and bought vouchers off these sites, which I'm about to give you, and got another 10% off. I said to him, he is in the right job. He is a deal hunter, and I absolutely love it. The two websites he's recommended, and I think there's more out there as well. One's called cardyard.co.uk, and the second one's called cards2cash.co.uk. Don't check them out if you're interested, but it's basically free money. It's a way of getting a deal on the stuff you want. And most of the big stores that you can think of are represented there. A great, great resource. Mr. Wiggins, well done.
He's coming for me. I don't like it. He's coming for me as a copywriter. He was on the podcast last week. There's only room for 2 Robs on this show, and I'm getting nervous. But it is a great tip. It's free money, like you say. Also, if you got gift cards for Christmas and you're just not sure if it's something that you're ever going to go and spend, don't let it expire. Go and sell it on one of these sites as well. You're not going to get full value, but it's better than nothing.
Before we wrap up, I need to stop you. And I need to stop you because we want to start something on the podcast in 2024. And if this sounds familiar, if you listen to other podcasts, yes, we've absolutely ripped this off other podcasts, but it works for them and I want it to work for us. Because yes, I'm talking to you, dear listener. I want a handshake agreement with you. I'm reaching over to you virtually right now, and I'm looking at you in the eye and I'm saying, have you listened to at least 5 of these podcasts? And if the answer is yes, I want us to shake hands. And what I want us to agree on is that you are going to either subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm assuming you're subscribed to the podcast already. But if you haven't, then do that right now. Because go and subscribe to the YouTube channel. because that helps us. And we are hopefully helping you. And that's the whole thing about this agreement, right? We'll keep churning out loads of free content for you. After 10 years in, we're asking for something in return. You don't have to go and buy our products or services. They're there if you want them, but we don't force you to do that. But we are asking for you to do something now after 10 years. We are making that ask. So my hand's reaching over to you. Go and subscribe to YouTube. And if you really want to help us, share the pod, because podcasts only grow by word of mouth. You can try other ways, but the proven way for podcasts to work is by word of mouth. And if we've helped you, we can help others. So share the podcast with people, and as a minimum, go and subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel. That helps us. So I'm reaching over right now. I'm waiting for you to reach back. We're going to look each other in the eye and we're going to shake. And I know if we shake on it, you'll do it, because I've done property deals on handshakes before. And you know what? If I'm working with a reputable person, I trust them. There's people I trust with handshake deals, and you, listener, are one of them. So please shake my hand, do that simple task, and we will carry on year after year for you. That's all we ask in return. Simple, Rob.
It's true. I'll know if you've done it. I've studied the YouTube algorithm so much over the last year, I can tell if a button's being clicked or not. So don't try and get out of it. So give us your click. In return, you'll get at least one quality video every week. We don't make any money off the ad revenue. We don't enable ads on YouTube. We just want to grow it because it's another avenue to get this information out there. So please do your bit.
So thank you. We've shaken on it. That is us done for this week. And you know what? I've loved this episode. I think we've brought the new year energy into 2024. But I don't want this to be a one-week wonder. We're going to bring that energy in next week. So make sure you join us on next week's podcast. And of course, we'll be back with Ask Rob or Rob on Tuesday. And if you want to triple up, then check us out in the Sunday Times each and every, guess what, Sunday. Until those wonderful events occur, take care, have fun, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.